Welcome to part 2 of our Sport Performance Pillar series, where we're going to be discussing speed and power development. Of course, this is one of the premier qualities, some of the premier qualities that athletes are looking to have. They're always looking to run faster, jump higher, be more powerful on the field of play. So that's what we're going to be talking about now. If you haven't watched part 1 of this series about understanding specificity, stop, go back, watch that, then move on to this one. So the first thing to consider when developing speed and power is that we're going to utilize both extensive and intensive means to do that. Extensive is going to be submaximal, preparatory, essentially developing the capacity for hard training or using it in technical learning, recovery capacities, but it's going to be focused a lot on rhythmic, repeated submaximal efforts over a longer period of time. And early in the training phase, we're probably going to use more extensive work to build up an athlete's capacity in all regards, their joint tissue, tendon integrity, particularly the feet and ankles, to be ready for more, sprinting and jumping, elasticity, in the muscles, as well as just sort of general conditioning before we move on to the intensive work. So this is going to be more of the developmental work, actually doing the hard training. So this is the fun stuff that you see on YouTube and Instagram, the high and far jumps, the maximal effort sprinting. So we need to do extensive and intensive. They all have their place, and the extensive is going to support intensive. And for athletes of different levels, if you're working with youth athletes, extensive is going to be that much more important, so that you make sure that they're really moving right. And then as you get athletes older, capable of higher outputs, they're going to have to use extensive because their intensive stuff will be so taxing that they just can't do it all the time. And you got to make sure that their bodies are really ready for that type of training. Now, the role of rhythm is extremely important when developing speed and power for the athlete. Rhythm is going to go along with the quality of relaxation. And I first got exposed to this at a very young age. When I started doing track and field at just 8 years old, running for the Irvine Cougars track club, where I threw the shot put and also ran, I think at 8, probably the 50 meter, along with the 100 meter, 4x100 meter relay, 2-time Southern California champions in the 4x100 meter relay. So the credentials are pretty impressive there. But we first got introduced to that by our great coaches. They use 2 concepts for this. And you see this, this was great for us at 8 years old, and you see it all the way up to Olympic level sprinters. And the way that our coaches phrased it for us when we were young was the jelly jaw and the potato chip grip. So jelly jaw was having that loose, relaxed face while you sprint, not clenching your teeth, because as soon as you get tight there, you get tight through your whole body, and that tight muscle is going to be slower. And then the next part was the potato chip grip, and they actually did, I think, break out a can of Pringles and have us hold a potato chip between our thumb and forefinger and not make sure we weren't breaking it as we ran, that we weren't clenching our fists and again getting tight, because those tight muscles are going to be slower muscles. Did young husky Chad Wesley Smith eat those potato chips after he was finished running? Of course I did. But first I learned better sprinting mechanics along the way. So teaching the athlete to move with a rhythm is going to enhance their coordination, their balance, their speed. So exercises like skipping drills, teaching proper arm swing, running at a pace that they can maintain relaxation and proper technique is going to be critical. Because if all you do is say, right off the bat, run as fast as you can, if they have bad technique, they're just going to further ingrain that bad technique. And when you see these really reactive, elastic, explosive athletes, sprinters, long jumpers, triple jumpers, the most explosive athletes in the world, it's going to be very evident watching them run what great rhythm, coordination, and relaxation they have in their movement. When it comes to sprint training, as we're relaxed to it, as they're moving relaxed so they can move reactive, elastic, with great speed, quality over quantity. So to get fast, you've got to run fast. You can't run a bunch of 4.8s to run a 4.5. While I said submaximal stuff to making sure that we're running as fast as they can with good technique is important, there's going to come a time where you got to run fast. You got to push for maximal velocity. And this true speed training has got to happen in a well-rested, fully recovered state. I've had the opportunity to work with some really high-level athletes, NFL, college football, Olympic sprinters, and particularly those college football players or high-level high school guys as they're getting ready to go to college. You ask them, well, what did your team have you do for speed training? And they say, well, we'd run 110s, 16 110s or 20 40s, that type of thing. And what they were really referring to was conditioning, and bad conditioning at that. But they weren't doing true speed training because they weren't doing it with a full recovery. If you get the opportunity to watch real high-level sprinters, Olympic caliber sprinters, collegiate sprinters, go through a speed training workout, you're going to watch it and think, these are the laziest people ever. Because you're going to see about 5 or 6 seconds of effort and then several minutes of rest in between. And that is what has to happen. So as to run fast, you've got to be fully recovered. And that means a very big discrepancy in work to rest. So a simple rule of thumb, most of you watching this probably working with high school athletes, maybe college athletes, maybe youth athletes, is for every 10 yards or 10 meters of sprinting that you will rest at least 30 seconds between reps. The faster that athlete gets, the more capable of high outputs they are, the longer rest they're going to need in between. Now, to the inverse side of that, if you have an athlete with low fitness levels, they may need longer rests as well until they can build up some capacity, just because they're going to get too tired right off the bat to repeat those efforts. But that hopefully will be a pretty short window of time. For a few years, I had the opportunity to observe Dwayne Chambers' spring or his warm weather training camp here in the United States. And Dwayne has run 6:42 in the 60 meters, one of the fastest times ever, sub 10 in the 100, an Olympian, just an incredibly powerful, explosive guy. And he was resting, a minute, maybe a minute plus in between these intensive bouts. So running 10 meters and then resting over a minute, minute and a half. And obviously he's at the far end of the spectrum in terms of output, so he was needing quite a bit of rest. With the idea of quality over quantity, we're going to be doing this stuff with full recoveries. How much should they be sprinting? How many, what should their volume be? This is going to vary widely by, position, by all the things we talked about in the specificity video of understanding how the athlete moves. But as you put together speed training, training for acceleration and maximal velocity, generally between 150 and 300 meters of volume is going to be appropriate. If you have really big, heavy athletes, offensive and defensive linemen, they might be a little bit less than that. And if you have extremely high output athletes, they could go a little bit over that 300, but remember that those really, really fast, explosive wide receivers, defensive back types, they're capable of such great outputs that every effort they produce carries with it a lot of stimulus and a lot of fatigue, so you really need to watch their volumes. Jumping is also going to be a great way to develop power and speed for the athlete. Extensive jumps are going to be critical in terms of preparing the athlete for the intensive work to follow, making sure their Achilles, their ankles, their calves, everything feels good and is ready for some volume and some really high efforts. So doing exercises like rolling hops, low and high pogo jumps, exercise we refer to as ninja hops, which is like a very soft landing on top of a box and then jump back down to the ground, very soft landing, rhythmic action, spending the same time on top of the box as you do on the ground with sort of silent landings. Those are some of the ones we like. Single leg variations of those, zigzags, tons of different drills you can be creative with there. You're going to use that extensive stuff to get you ready for the more intensive efforts. My favorite variation there are double leg bounds for distance. For athletes who mostly play their sport on the horizontal plane, who are sprinting, and having to cover ground as much as possible, jumping out is going to have a little bit higher transfer than jumping up. So if you need an athlete to run really fast, look at these jumps for distance. And why I feel the double leg bound for distance, as you can link multiple jumps together, is so superior to an exercise like a box jump, which is a really popular jumping exercise, of course, is that it's developing both explosive qualities in the first jump and then reactive elastic qualities as they have to transfer the energy from the first jump into the second, second into the third, third into the fourth. Pick a number of jumps that's appropriate for your athletes. When I'm working with football players, typically I have the linemen will do 2 consecutive jumps, big skill players like linebackers, tight ends, running backs, 3 jumps, and then the smaller skill players like wide receivers and defensive backs, 4 consecutive jumps. But observe your athletes, see what they're ready for. If the quality of the movement is breaking down, shut it down at that, or have them do less jumps per effort. Other jumps that we like to include, definitely box jumps can be a good one, and if you're limited for space, they're particularly good. They're great for reducing the force of gravity in the landing. So for heavy athletes, you can also do that with jumps for distance by jumping uphill or upstairs, so where they're not falling as far into the landing. That's going to save the joints a little bit, and in earlier phases of training, that could be a really great option. We'll talk about that in a future video on longer term planning. And make sure if you're including box jumps in your training that it does not become an exercise in how far can your athlete pull their knees up to see if they can land in a super deep squat, but you want to have them landing in parallel or above position. Weighted box jumps can be a good option. Doing rebounding box jumps can be appropriate, but the athlete has to be ready for it because now they're going to have to overcome a lot of force on the way down. It can be a tough situation for the Achilles, but if you feel like you have an athlete who's demonstrated through like the ninja hops, an extensive version of reactive box jumping, that they can control their body well and perform the exercise well, then a reactive box jump can be effective as well. Hurdle hops are also good options and probably preferable to bounds for distance for athletes who play a lot in the vertical plane, like basketball players and volleyball players, so who are more concerned with how high they can jump rather than how fast they can run, how far they can propel their body. Jumping is a great exercise for athletes because it's going to enhance acceleration, and the ability to go from 0 to as fast as possible in as short a time as possible is so much of what constitutes, quote unquote, sport speed, or how fast the athlete plays, because we've all seen those athletes who might have great high-end speed, but because so much of sport is played in small areas, how fast can they get to 5 yards, 10 yards? That athlete who maybe has better acceleration but less top-end speed appears to play faster than the athlete with a little bit less acceleration but the greater top-end speed. The next part of developing speed and power qualities that I love for athletes are medicine ball throws. Medicine ball throws are a great exercise because they are so simple to teach triple extension. Much easier to teach a medicine ball throw than a snatch or clean and jerk. And when you have athletes who are not weightlifters, taking the time to teach them the snatch and clean and jerk, if you have, you're in a high school or college setting and you've got that athlete for 3 to 5 years, then sure, take the time to teach them how to do the Olympic lifts. But if you're working in a situation where you may only have a couple months to prepare that athlete, or you have someone who feels like their wrists, shoulders, elbows get beat up by Olympic lifting variations, then med ball throws are going to be great. They teach triple extension. They can be trained through multiple planes of movement, so you can create power, up, out, backwards, rotational power, and they are true explosive movements because there's no deceleration in the throw. The ball is leaving their hands, so they are accelerating all the way through the movement. So even if you were to try and say, lifting with bands or chains to have that compensatory acceleration to avoid any deceleration of the barbell at the end of the movement, if the bar stays in your hands at the end of the movement, it's decelerated. When the medicine ball leaves the athlete's hands, they're accelerating all the way through the movement, and that is a true explosive movement and going to have greater carryover to their sport performance. Plus, through different weights of medicine balls, you can attack many different points on the force velocity curve, get into special strength exercises with heavier or lighter balls depending on the athlete, the position, and their needs, their preparedness and needs. So if you want to learn more about developing speed power qualities for your athletes, highly suggest checking out Global Sport Concepts from James Smith, as well as his book Applied Sprint Training. Joel Smith, a Jug Life guest, go check out his episode, has a great website covering this called Just Fly Sports, as well as the work of coaches Dan Paff and Stuart McMillan out at Altus in Arizona, and of course Charlie Francis, who so many of us have derived a lot of ideas from. Give him a Google. Great articles, great books. Thanks for watching installment number 2 of our Sport Performance Pillars series on developing speed power qualities. We have 3 more videos coming out in this series over the next 3 weeks. So subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with friends, and look for the next videos in this. Thanks for watching.